up with, no money and didn't have the money for it and whatever else. So I went right into business for myself. Sales was a skill I decided that I would need to learn at a young age.
Tell us your story. How'd you end up owning 3 franchise dealerships?
I remember May 9th, 2009, sitting in an office and, going, this is it. I needed about 30 minutes to myself to pull myself together and then game plan and team, I got bad news and here's what we're going to do. And we did it. So onward we went.
What do you think the future is of the family-owned automotive dealership in the next 10 years? Alrighty, guys, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Today's guest is Scott Falcone. That's right. He's a dealer operator based in Chicago with ownership in World Hyundai Madison, World Kia Joliet, and World Automotive. So before we kind of dive into business, how would you describe, Scott Falcone? How would you describe yourself?
I'd like to say I'm maybe not as intense as I've always been, but I don't think that really ever leaves you. At least it hasn't left me yet. So fairly intense in most of the things I do, whether it's, personal life or professional life. I do like standards. I do like accountability, and we keep a high bar. So you reach for the stars and you land on the moon. You've done okay, I guess. It's been a philosophy that's served me well. That's been around a long time before me. But I think we have an organization that kind of espouses that culture. A lot of people feel that way, and so I think we all kind of hold one another accountable. And same thing in our personal life. My family all has quite high standards for themselves. So it's just kind of who we are, how we're cut, I guess.
Where do you think that mentality came from?
That's a good question. Probably there's got to be some DNA there to a degree, but I think it's environment. I guess mine maybe wasn't a great one. As you think of your formative years, didn't have a lot of anything. Figured that out at a very young age, and I think that maybe that's where it came from, was wanting to have more, to be better, to have more opportunity, and certainly wanted to do that for my kids and the people in the organization as we've all grown together. So I think that's probably where it was.
So you weren't one of those dealers who had a PhD, were you?
No. I am a PhD now. I have 2 sons that are in the business, but they are both on their own game plan and doing great. One graduated from Northwood recently and started selling cars for the last 6 months, and he's doing fine, figuring his way out around the business, what he likes, what he doesn't. And the other son has been doing that since he's probably, I guess he's been in around the store since he was a 13-year-old kid. He's worked in the BDC since he was 15, and now he's one of our general managers at the Kia store. So he's all the way in, and he does a great job. 2 different boys completely, but together I think they're going to really enjoy their careers and help us move forward.
Tell us your story, because I have some friends out there, and there's a lot of people who are listening. Not everybody listens to the podcast, owns a car dealership, but a lot of them own used car stores. So can you tell us how you got into the position that you're in? How'd you end up owning 3 franchise dealerships? Or 2, 3? It
wasn't a game plan for sure. I guess I've been in and around sales since I was a little kid. When you grow up with, no money and I didn't go to college. I didn't have the money for it and whatever else. So I went right into business for myself, and sales was a skill I decided that I would need to learn at a young age. Part of it was I don't feel that I'm an introvert or an extrovert. I think I'm in the middle somewhere. An ambivert, I believe, is a new term that's floating around out there in the world.
Okay.
You have your moments of being an extrovert or an introvert, and I recognized that I could have been more of an extrovert at a younger age, but so I decided to get into sales to challenge myself, actually, to overcome whatever fears. I really don't. It's been such a long time now. I just feel like selling is part of breathing, so I don't think about it anymore. But I do remember that's why I got into selling, was to help me overcome whatever fears or weaknesses I felt I had at the time. I thought, the more no's I'd get, the more rejection I'd get, the tougher you'd get. And I guess it worked, and it became a mindset for me and a career. So I got into it a little bit later than most people. I had like I said, owned businesses and different things, and started selling cars. And cut a couple of lucky breaks, produced, and somehow got into a management position. Then somehow, worked my way up, into a director position, a general manager position. Was part of a great organization in the late 90s, early 2000s that, a store that was selling 80 cars to 500. And, I was fortunate enough to be part of that as a great team there and a general manager for a long stretch of that. And there was a guy that just third party put us together that was thinking about getting out. I wanted in. I didn't know I wanted in, but I guess the more you keep working your way up the food chain, and at the time, ownership was quite different than it looks today. It was actually quite easy. People were throwing around percentages of stores like it was nothing, and so different era. And I had the pleasure and displeasure / awareness of meeting a variety of owners. And when I saw who owned stores, I said, "This if he owns a store," I said, "everybody ought to own a store." Is really what got me to thinking, like, why not? And so, I saved every penny that I had, and like I said, I met somebody who was interested in getting out, and so I was able to put a deal together and bought my first 10% of the store. And after several months, we had a real good relationship, and things turned at the time, and decided that we would become partners and try to grow and do different things. And that was a little over 6 years of being in the business. So it was a pretty quick trip to the plate to get there. And so, we've had different scenarios. We've come and gone our own ways in different scenarios. He has stores as well, and is his own success in his own right, for sure. Great guy. And so that's kind of how I got into it. Had bought and sold a store as well along the way, acquired a couple stores. Lost a store in 2009 in the bankruptcy. General Motors sent us a letter and said, "See ya." That was an expensive day.
So what happened with that? How'd that work out?
Well, I don't think I guess when you think about it, when you go bankrupt, which they were, everybody's it's a lifeboat, right? Everybody's swimming for the side of the lifeboat, and they're getting in. They're going to grab the ladder, and that's what a business would do in those conditions. And in those conditions, everybody was swimming for the side of the lifeboat. And so we were dealers. We're just collateral damage in a corporate life-saving moment is what it is. I never really begrudged it. They had tough decisions to make. Those people that worked at the OEM weren't happy about doing this either. We certainly weren't happy about it, and it was quite expensive. But they owned the right to do what they did then, right? So they were protecting themselves ultimately is what they were doing. I can't speak to some of the inside workings. They had their chance to write the dealership size, if you will, because the networks had grown ridiculous. I think at one point when we lost our store, there was 5 similar brands within a 5.5 mile market. So the herd needed to be culled, so to speak. It was just a real ugly way of doing it.
So after you guys, so basically they said, "Hey, we're closing down this franchise location." So what did you end up doing after that?
So 3 years prior to that, the Hyundai store came online.
Okay.
So we did have that. We did have the ability to move some of our people there. It was unfortunate that we did lose a lot of people, had to lay a lot of people off, like every other industry did, during that time. We've remained profitable all through 08, 09, 10, and then bought a Chevy store in 13, sold it in 18, bought a Kia store in 15. We still have that store, expanded into the used car store. So, we have to take advantage of opportunities when they present themselves. And that's what we've done, to the best of our ability. Great team. They're the other ones that make it happen, and here we sit, pretty fortunate.
A lot of intricacies being a dealer. I don't think people quite understand the amount of financial risk that's on the table every day when you're a dealer.
No, but I've done it 4 times. I don't want to do it again. I don't have to do it again, which is probably even a better thing. But I can count 4 different experiences where I had to, gather up all my chips if I wanted to move forward. Go to the bank, go do whatever I had to do, to make the next leap, if you will. And that was, those are some. Those moments are not for everybody, for sure. I guess I felt like if I saw the lay of the land, I knew what I was doing. I felt like I was very confident in our ability to succeed. I was both the jockey and the horse, so I didn't think I could fail, quite honestly. I would have a much harder time betting on something that I wasn't controlling at the time. Today, I would say that that's probably much different. I would have a much easier time betting on something that I'm not holding the steering wheel on day in and day out. Back then, I was there, driving it, holding that steering wheel like a death grip. And so I was confident we were going to make it happen. Really, there was no fear. There was just, working your way back to no debt and so on and so forth. But today, I wouldn't do it. I would probably be interested in betting on myself as part of a group and giving other people opportunities to be in positions like I've been fortunate enough to be in.
Well, in that, while you were talking about, all the times you've had to gather up all your chips and, go in and, do something you didn't necessarily want to do, but you had to do. How did you manage your home life, going through these things? Are you a very conservative guy at home, with your money? Or are you like some of these dealers where, they spend it as soon as they get it? What's your take?
No, I certainly don't do that. I've done nothing but thought about the future. I think when you come up with nothing, which is exactly how I came up with zero, I think I remember I knew we were poor and broke somewhere when I was about, I think, 10 years old. I won't forget the story because it's been impactful for me. We were in some big retail place and I wanted to get a pair of jeans. My mom told me, maybe next time, and I thought, what do you mean next time? It's a pair of jeans. And I figured out we were broke. So that landed for me and stuck for me for a long time. So I went to work, in junior high school, have never stopped essentially, saving money and putting money aside, preparing for the rainiest of rainy days. And then again, you get reminded, like I did, that, things could be taken away from you as fast as they can be given to you. When it came to, a franchise that we lost. And so I'm kind of the guy that everybody knows as I've got the backup to the backup to the backup plan.
Okay.
So I've set myself up like that. And I've had plenty of fun along the way. I probably would have a lot more if I was a little bit more aggressive. But it served me well doing what I'm doing. And like I said, we're a very stable organization. Our all of our family and our home life together with, all of the extended family. I think everybody is pretty happy with where they are because of, how we've conducted ourselves over the last 30 years financially.
Yeah. So you have both your sons in the business.
Yeah.
So do you have any advice for people who have, children or family members in the business? Any advice for people out there?
Yeah, I do. I think that if they have interest young or even if they don't, I think that this was what I decided to do. I think it served me well and it set the table for both of them to think, right? So I would suggest that as a parent in this business, whether you own something or whether you're running something or you're a manager and whatever the case is to do your best to set your children up to guarantee them an opportunity and an opportunity only. And I made that very clear to both of them that I will promise you an opportunity to be in the business. And that doesn't mean partner in the business or run the business. It means be in the business. And that means that maybe I will allow you to become a porter or a valet when you're young. And then maybe I will allow you to work in the BDC. But I'm going to continue to promise you the opportunity. And you make the most of it. And so that's what they're in the process of doing. And my oldest certainly has done that. He made the most of all of his opportunities. He's never, used his last name for any advantage whatsoever. He's just who he is. He's his own guy. And I'm really proud of him for that. They say we do have some similarities, but he's certainly his own man. And he's remembered that. And I think that, he's got a young son now as well, who talks about the business, and that's all he talks about. And he's got a long way to go before he's going to be in the business. But, I hope that he reminds him that, listen, I'm going to guarantee you an opportunity. I think that's what we can do for our children. We shouldn't be guaranteeing them other things.
I agree with you because, in order to run a business, you have to have a respect for the business and what it can give you and what it can take away. And without just basically handing it to them, I think people have to work for it 100%.
Well, I think it helps, and I think that you respect is earned, right? It's just not
100%.
given.
Yeah.
And so, I also tell a lot of people who are working their way up the ranks in anything that they do in life, act as if. So, if you're a salesperson today and you want to be a new car manager, start acting like a new car manager today, whatever that means. Walk, talk, dress, okay? So that when you're promoted, the respect's already been there. And the natural evolution of you is just a natural evolution. People go, yeah, that makes sense. She did a great job, when she was doing this, and she always acted like she was in charge. And yeah, great call. And that makes their life a lot better too. Your managers, your boss who's promoted you makes their life easier, because then they're looked at like good decision. You don't want to be promoted or run up through the ranks and be looked at like, yeah, the only reason he's there is he's so-and-so's kid, or he's a favorite, or anything else like that. That's not any level of respect. So following some of those guidelines, I think, helps a lot.
You had mentioned, before we got on this podcast, that you have some new dealership software tools or something like that going, something with AI. What do you got going on?
People decided to dive in, in late 22, 23, when, ChatGPT kind of arrived on the scene, if you will. And I certainly did. And I really thought it was important for somebody in the organization to really embrace it and figure it out. Like, what does this look like? And I haven't stopped. And, I'm kind of our AI champion in the store.
Yeah.
And I'm a pioneer. I've got the arrows in my back to prove it. So, good or bad, I'm first into the deep end of the pool, because that's kind of part of my job, And so
don't take offense to this, but I'm surprised by the amount of significantly older people, older than me. I'm in my 30s. I don't know how old you are, but a lot of older people are like really adapting to AI and ChatGPT. Like everybody's using it. I was like, I would not expect you to use that.
Yeah, most people don't when they see, the tech stack that we've developed. And, I fast forward to spending, the last couple of years really, really deep and developing tools that were designed just for our store to help us, right? Help close deals, help move deals forward. Not just saying, hey, write me a better email, but, building templates with scenarios from the BDC and, really crafting more works of art, quite honestly, through templates or calculators or all types of different things. And they were all rudimentary, but they were all really effective. But the problem was we were just loading them up on this desktop. Here's the next version of this and that. So finally, I said enough's enough. And for the last 6 months or so, I've been putting them all together in a portal. And so there's I think we're closing in on 20 tools and probably another 8 or 10 under development, but they all have different roles in the dealership. Some are simple as calculators that were built with AI and quickly, because I'm not a technical person. I don't know how to code. I certainly understand it a lot better than most people do, just because I've been exposed to it. And I did have a software company back in late 09, 10 as well, that I by accident, because I was building, again, something for our dealership. So that's how that started. And so now I'm looking at the products, and I think that what we're going to deliver to the market in the near future is going to be of tremendous value in so many areas. And I'm witnessing it in the store, the cultural change too, because they're seeing that, okay, well, he's on board. He's really diving in deep, and he built this for our team. And I used this tool and this calculator, and I just closed this deal because of the tool. I just held gross because of the tool. I just engaged somebody who had gone, dark on, a month and a half of emails. And this particular email was crafted now, and they've re-engaged, and they're coming in. So they're seeing the results, right? So now culturally, our store is really, chin deep into AI. And I know that sounds kind of broad, right? Because it is. But they just recognize that it's not about, give me the best chicken taco recipe, or, hey, write me an email for Mrs. Smith. She ghosted me. That's just not going to get it done. They are understanding, more of the intricacies that are going to be required to make this, be a leverageable product. And so, we're going to be taking that out. Probably it'll be the next few weeks or so.
So I have a question for you. I mean, with dealers, car business, there's a lot of ego out there. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agree, and I'm in 20 groups, 220 groups currently. That's 40 dealers or general managers in the group. I've been in and out of them anywhere for probably 17, 18 years. I've met hundreds and hundreds, and different events and different places you go, NADA or whatever the case is, and there are I'll date myself, but there was a cartoon character called Colonel McBragg back in the day. And there's a lot of Colonel McBraggs in this business that are car dealers, and pretty hard to stomach, being around some of them. I'm fortunate that I have a group of dealers that I associate with in my 20 groups, and just have known over the years that are just amazing people that will do anything for you to help you, and that's really, I think most dealers are probably fall into that bucket. It's just some of the ones with the big egos, like you mentioned, that are sometimes difficult to be around, and you just steer clear of those guys, right? Like in life, like anything.
Yeah, I mean, it just always makes me wonder, though, because I feel like there's egos in every business, but for some reason, like there's a concentration of them in the automotive space. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because you got to be kind of a psycho to be in the car business, because you just got to keep telling yourself they're just saying no right now, not right now, not right now. I don't know. I don't know
there's a lot of levels of psycho, I guess, in the business, using your term, but there's plenty of egos, and but again, you just you pick the people you want to be around, right? Yeah,
you definitely got to pick the people you want to be around, and if you're lucky enough, not everybody, but if you're lucky enough, you get to choose who you want to do business with. But I guess you do no matter what, but it's just how bad do you want to deal with them? But interesting. So, family-owned dealerships, small locations. Like, the thing that I think about is all of the consolidation that's happening, the massive, the AutoNations, the Lithias, like these big guys. Like, what do you think the future is of the family-owned automotive dealership in the next 10 years, 15 years? Do you think it's
super challenging.
Uncertain, super challenging. Right?
Yeah, because, it does help, to have economies of scale for sure. And, the bigger groups definitely have economies of scale. There's advantages. And I don't know that there's a perfect formula, that 5 is the first, best level, for economies of scale, because you can leverage all these positions and save in certain areas. And then the next one is going to be 10 or 20, whatever. I don't know that there's a perfect formula for that, but I do know that you can leverage that. And we try to do that even with our locations as best we can. We share a few different positions, and it helps. And it would help, we've been on the hunt for stores, for a couple of years. It would help with the economies of scale for a couple more, because we could expand with existing people, we could leverage people, give them opportunities financially, and so on and so forth, and get the job done cheaper all the way around. But the price of poker has changed dramatically, and so I think it's going to be tough for people that are sized like we are, to grow. A lot easier for bigger stores. Now, the downside, I've witnessed a lot of stores, even in my market, that have grown from a few stores and maybe second and third gen stores. And, they were just thinking that, growth sounds great. I mean, it does. And, everybody in this business is an entrepreneur. Maybe not every second or third gen is. They're just second or third gen. The parents were. But for the most part, I feel that that's true. But I've seen stores, where people take good stores and turn them into very average stores because they continued to grow, and they just don't know how to scale. Scaling is I think is a much bigger word than people realize, if people even think of the word scale. Scaling isn't just I've got 3, now I've got 6, or I've got 6, I've got 10. You have to support that along the way, or you're going to wind up going backwards, or 10 and 6 or 10 and 2, owning 100% of a watermelon, 100% of a grape versus 50% of a watermelon, right? That theory. So just growing for the sake of growing and then destroying and decimating your numbers didn't mean you scaled successfully. What
is something that you've seen other dealers do? Like you had mentioned, some people take a great store and make it average, what do they do to make it average, in your opinion?
They don't grow their people. They don't grow their systems, their processes. And sometimes you've got a store that's been around for a while. Let's say it is a second-gen store. Let's say it's in a great location. It's almost hard to screw it up. And you've got people in there that might not be great. I've seen this, average people in great locations. And you get pretty solid results in spite of yourself. And you get a good brand, and it's almost like it's on autopilot. You grow some stores, you take those same people, you drop them in elsewhere, and everything starts to sink. That's a perfect indication, is your team wasn't as strong as you thought that they were. You might have had the location, you might have had a brand, you might have had no debt, you might have had a lot of things, a lot of wind, tailwind. The minute you caught headwind, it's going to be on your people. Now what? And if your people weren't up to the task and you didn't know it, and oftentimes you wouldn't know it, right? Because the mettle of a man is tested, in difficult times, not easy. And so if these people all came up through an easy store and things get tough, you don't really know what you've got there. I've seen that. That's probably the best example is just the wrong people as you continue to scale. That's going to be a big part of scaling is people. And I'm a big process person. Michael Gerber is one of my favorite authors. I read him probably 30 years ago and continue to read his stuff. It's that old, but systems run the business and people run the systems. And so, you lay in actually a franchisable system. Is your business franchisable? If it is, then you've started something good, right? Because process is there, procedures there. Now you can drop in average people in a great process and get above average results. That's when you get magic. And so we're very much process driven. And when we find a process that works, we try to make sure that we install it as law.
So let's talk about that. Because I feel like a lot of people do lack in that area, installing systems or processes into their business. So, like for example, let's say like your sales process, right? You want to, what's your method to like teaching people new processes? Are you sitting there making them read a manual? Are you doing a powwow with the group? Are you doing one-on-one training, watching videos? Like, how do you train people to pick up what you're putting down?
Well, lately the answer is poorly. just in a, not everything is a straight line up, right? And so it's a real challenge right now, because when you're flush with the right people, then you bring people in. All of a sudden it seems like you have a lot more time to spend with them to do all the things that you mentioned, and even I think that's probably one of the hardest parts of our business is to integrate new people into a working system, and that's a real trick. And I will tell you that we've recently have had just random turnover for just it happens. You have a stable environment, ton of great salespeople, a long time, and the next thing you know, somebody moves, somebody passes away, a divorce or this or that, and you're like, wow, what happened? Looking around, and you bring in some new people, and you're like, it points out some of the current failures you've got going on in your organization, and we're actually re-examining some of our manuals, if you will, and some of the ways that we bring you into the system. And we're not just we don't throw you a pen and a desk and point to a computer and tell you go get them and good luck. But we know we have to evolve in even bringing them on board. We do work with veteran salespeople. We have separate pay plans for those people. We have separate scales for salespeople. We take it seriously, but it's all in the execution. I've got a great process for bringing new people into the environment. I've got great process for everything. But you got to execute them. That's the people, right? So we try to look. Law is law. This is a good process. You flip the light switch. When Edison did it after 10,000 times and the light finally came on, he didn't say, let's keep working on this thing. He said, this works. This is law. So, I kind of like doing that. When we see that there's a path to success over and over and over, why would we deviate from it? So right now, that would be probably one of our challenges, is to integrate these new people, to your point, into a new challenging career. Our business is changing a lot. It's tough enough 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Today, it just continues to get tough, right? We're going to talk about throwing AI into the mix and customers leveraging AI and product knowledge, and the list goes on and on. So it's a challenge for sure, but you have to start with a plan and to create processes, and then you have to hold your people accountable to execute it, because without execution, you got nothing.
Man, that's holding people accountable. That is one thing that not me personally, struggle with. I'll hold people accountable all day long.
Yeah.
But dealers that I work with and that I talk to, and I'm like, hey, we're putting in this process, we're training the people like this way, and I just need you guys to hold them accountable because I can't live here every day. You live here. Oh man, that's worse than pulling teeth, man. Like getting people to be accountable without babysitting them, So what do you think is the best way to train people now? Because everyone's attention spans are like half of what they used to be. You think one-on-one training, group training, video manuals? What do you think?
Yes, that's what I think.
Yeah, all of it.
Yeah, I do, because I think everybody learns differently, right?
Okay.
What may impact me, is different from what may impact you or somebody else. And so I think that you have to have all those things available. And when you, as a leader, which we're going to be your general managers and new car managers and so on and so forth, when they recognize that, little Billy that's joined the team over there, is all about videos, then let him train on videos.
Yeah.
Don't make them listen to audibles or whatever the case is. I mean, I read books. I don't like Audible. I get lost. Next thing you know, I'm daydreaming and there's a book in my ear and I'm not gaining anything from it. So, we all gather in different ways. So every one of those things, I think, is what you got to do.
What's your take on social media and selling cars?
I don't think that we've, it's not like it's a year or two old, social media and the ability to sell cars. We've been screwing this thing up for a long time, and there's a handful of people that are really, doing it well, and we should be paying attention to those guys.
Yeah.
I have a full-time videographer, and we in a studio, the green screen, and multiple cameras and lighting and everything. And anytime you want as a salesperson, you can wander over and film a TikTok or whatever you want to do. Communicate with Mrs. Jones about a car that she's inquired about, and you just want to get out in front of it and do an extra walk around. And we haven't made that law, because when we make it law, we're going to have to start terminating people who don't do it.
Yeah.
We're in the process of encouraging, because that's accountability, right? So we're encouraging at this point to head over there, and I'm shocked at the youth that we have in the store who just no desire whatsoever. So we're actually looking for people, kind of flipping the script on some of the ads that we're posting for employment, and we're leaning into an influencer type, people who enjoy being on there and spending time on there. Part of the interview process is how much time do you spend on social media, which sounds a little bit crazy, but what do you use it for? We're trying to ultimately get to personal growth, not I love to scroll all day. That's not going to be real beneficial for us. But I think that as an industry, we've done a terrible job of really leveraging it, and only a handful of people have really hit the home runs. I know that, again, we're leaning into it very hard with some of our team members at all different stages, and a couple people have gotten on board, and I'm positive and I'm hopeful that we'll be seeing a lot more social activity the way it's supposed to be done in this year, actually, this quarter.
I would hope so and think so, man. I mean, I'm surprised that it hasn't played a larger role in your guys' business yet, because a lot of dealers I talk to, I mean, it's just like what you said is the basic recap. We're leaning more towards content creators. We're hiring people with large audiences. Like.
Yeah, if you can find the right person, it's
if you can find the right person.
Yeah, and I think that it's no different than the AI cultural impact that we now have in our store, because we showed somebody, right? We can talk till you're blue in the face about this is going to work, and if you did this, you'll feel better, and if you do all these things, you'll be this and that. You got to show people at the end of the day. They need, they like people like proof, and so I do think that's kind of what we need is some proof. When it came to the evolution of using good AI tools to sell more cars, we've got the evidence and the proof, and so all of a sudden everybody believes in it and everybody's behind it and everybody's digging in. The same thing will happen once we have some evidence of social.
Yeah. Well, I think it's here to stay, but also though I start to wonder with AI coming into play, if this social media is only going to be a short window where people are the main thing that we watch. It's like a 5-year period, and now in the next 5 years, it's mostly going to be AI generated people on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. It's all going to be AI stuff. You think that's going to happen?
Yeah. I think at some point people are going to, they'll recognize what they're looking at, and they'll either, it's like watching a movie. Do you like watching, dramas, action, animation, so on and so forth? You know that they're movies, and you decided to watch the cartoons. It's a cartoon version of it. I think that eventually, and you learn that as you grow up and you got older, you decided, I really like action movies, and I like things that are realistic, or I like, true to crime or something like that. I don't like cartoons. But you learned that, you got there. I think same thing will happen with AI. You'll figure out that I'm watching, two lions, ballroom dance is a 15-second, AI generated nonsense or slop or fascinating that somebody did that. And then you'll make your decision what you want to watch, is what will happen. I mean, the algos will pick up that you like AI. Maybe you haven't figured it out. Maybe you think all this stuff is real. I mean, I guess it was on the internet after all.
Yeah.
So, but I do think that as people get smarter, and that's going to be a minute. You mentioned 5 years. I don't know if it's 2 or 3 or 5 or when it's really going to be. Do you think those lions were really dancing? No. You're still going to have those people out there too.
Well, man, I could talk for days about misinformation on the internet. Because I do still think that we're like in this weird Wild West version of the internet and social media where just like, you can post anything you want.
Yeah, and then you throw AI into the mix, to your point, and now what do you got? I mean,
just I feel like with social media as a whole, it's almost like I don't know what to believe, because now all of a sudden, like, we have so many experts out there on everything. Everybody's an expert on something. You know what I mean?
Mostly AI right now, I think. There's
AI or chat. They're reading chat scripts, and they're just like, every time we see a video, my wife sends me stuff all the time. She's like, "Did you know that, dolphins have 2 hearts?" or something stupid like that. Is that real? Like, I don't know. Like, they could just be posting that,
Yeah. Hopefully she's not listening to this since you pointed her out.
Nah, she knows. I always get on her. I was like, "You're on the social media too much." Like, is it real?
I think when you get your important news from TikTok, I think you probably need a little self-examination at some point. That probably isn't where you should consume your factual news. Not that TikTok doesn't have some value. I'm sure it does. But just not in that space, in my personal opinion.
What about, there's some other platforms out there that are basically giving that Amazon-like experience to dealers. Like, basically it's like, hey, you could put this plugin on your website, and now customers can buy cars online directly and, calculate their payments, sign paperwork, everything without even touching a salesperson. You think that's going to take off?
I think it would have already if it really was going to have traction. I think that there's going to be customers who love that. When you go way back in time to Saturn, you probably don't remember Saturn's model, or if you do, but it was, giving a few dealers in a geographic area Saturn stores, and then selling the car at MSRP, end of story. It was a one price strategy, and the idea of having dealers in the same market was, well, you're not motivated to drop the price because they're just going to go to your store 8 miles away and the other store 8 miles away, and so on and so forth. And in theory, that wasn't a terrible idea, but it didn't pan out that way. General Motors, I think, got in the way of that one. But the those type of people, and so we evolve now to, let's say, CarMax, right? We're not negotiating anything.
Yeah.
And I think that is, it's an environment that some people just gravitate toward because of who they are. The real good negotiators, or we'll call them the tough negotiators that want to come to a dealership and battle it out. They certainly don't have to, but they think they do, or they kind of want to as a customer. They're not going to CarMax, right? I feel like the people that bought Saturns and evolved into a CarMax customer are willing to overpay, and I say overpay because you're not getting good deals, at many of these places based on the prices that are there, but they're willing to kick that whole concept to the curb. I think they've been marketed to very well, or they've been led to believe that one price is a good price. One price is just one price. It has nothing to do with good or bad, So, but if you can get the concept that one price is a good price, well, you've really made magic, right? Because now you get to set, your own numbers, and that would probably be a better environment for all purchasing experiences in the car business. I am a fan of a one price environment. Give the dealers enough room to make a good living, to have enough capital to take care of their customers and our customers. Let us focus on product knowledge, an experience that's second to none for the customers, customer service, focusing on our facilities, focusing on product knowledge, everything but negotiation skills. We spend all of our time on negotiation skills and barely any time with our people on customer service. And we have to, because we have to make a deal. We have to figure out how to sell the car. If you remove that friction, everybody walks in, they just look at the thing they sold, that's it, and they saw it online, the price stays the same, it doesn't matter where you go. A Big Mac, costs, $5 almost anywhere you go in America. It tastes the same. It's, there's something to be said for that consistency. So if you show that it's a valuable car, it's a valuable experience, one price would work. The only thing we would negotiate on then is trades. Well, that's fine, because you're comfortable with the car. Now we're just going to do that, and maybe some aftermarket products, and then we've certainly got finance products to negotiate. So the negotiation isn't going to go away, and I don't know if we'll ever be in a one price environment, but it would certainly encourage people to buy more cars if we took that friction out of the deal. In the dealership model, we're driving people with poor negotiating guidelines and experiences into the hands of Carvana and CarMax and anybody else that is going to sell cars in that way, and they're not getting great deals in most of those experiences.
I see your point, and I could agree with that in the way that, we don't focus a lot of time on the customer experience, because normally when you go to a dealership, one thing, you don't go alone, right?
Right.
You got to bring somebody there who can listen to the numbers and make sure that you're going to get a good deal, or at least confirm that you guys both think it's a good deal, and it would be nice to have more of the customer experience side of things and less more the negotiating side of things. But there's good and bad things about that, because if you look at like Apple, they've trained us that an iPhone costs $1,500.
Right.
Whatever it is, there's no negotiating. You go in, you pay the price. Right. That's it. You want to finance it? Great.
You've already figured out that there was value for your $1,500. You love it. You can't wait to sign up for it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's a great example.
Good. But ultimately, I think the only person who loses in that equation is the consumer, because we all know we're way overpaying for these damn iPhones.
Don't forget, a good deal is a state of mind.
So I like that.
What define overpaying? I mean, if the phone was, what's a fair margin for Apple? Is 50% fair? So at the end of the day, if that phone's $750 and they got $1,500, that's 100% market. I mean, is that cost is $50? Is that fair? If your opinion is fair, if mine, if the rest of the world's is, there's the market. If it costs $100 and they were sell for $1,500, right? That's a pretty big markup. We might not think that that's fair, but again, a good deal is a state of mind. Even knowing that it was $100, but we got it for $1,500, if we felt good about it, then it's a good deal. It's an okay deal. It's a fine deal. I'm happy with that. Yeah. So I don't know that we get to, the consumer maybe being ripped off or highly profited on with certain products in the world. Software for sure, right? Traditionally 65 and 75% margins on software, but it doesn't slow people down. They buy and they think that they got what they got, and it is what it is, and you move on. But it's not that way in our business,
No, it's not. I think there's just too much cultural, stigmatisms around cars and not getting a good deal, that everything's overvalued. And maybe the big problem is the used car market and depreciation, because we all know as soon as you buy it, you roll off the lot, the thing's worth, 10-20% less than what you just paid for it, after taxes and everything, and
it's a bad, listen, I've told many people buying a car is a bad decision, but they go a lot faster than horses. I don't know what else to tell you. And bicycles, they're a lot warmer than bikes, so you can make your decision, but we're all living with it, right? So all boats know a rising tide, and the opposite is true when it comes to a depreciating asset like a vehicle. So what you do is you mitigate the depreciation as best you can. You work with a dealer that understands that knows that believes in that, and if they tell you get out of the car, it's time to go. You listen to them, because we can help people lessen the depreciation and the bad side of a deal. We can't make it go away, because that's where the value of car. Once things are headed south, all we can do is slow them down or catch a plateau on the way down and help customers with that.
So is the used car market, is it a good time to sell your car, or is it a bad time to sell your car?
It's no better today than it was 6 months ago or a year ago. There might have been a little bit of a lift, back then, but seasonally, you've got some things. I think right now that if you had a car that isn't worth very much or anything, it would be a really good time to exit it, because it's tax season, right? And cheap cars, even so-called junk, is bringing a lot more money right now, and it will, through the end of February, and then junk becomes junk again. I think that higher priced vehicles north of, let's just say $30,000 or $35,000 are still challenging, and the market is kind of shrinking, because once people decide to start spending into a $700 or $800 or $900 payment, which $35,000 may represent, $40,000 may represent, so quick math problem, they start thinking about new again. There used to be the people would go, well, I saved some money, I spent $42,000 on a used car. That mindset's changed a little bit. Sometimes people would rather step up and spend $52 or $60 instead of the $42. So that's an iffy market. We kind of exit those quickly. We keep everything that we think we can sell to the masses and price points. But when we start getting 1-year-old trades, 2-year-old trades that are just pricier vehicles, we won't give those much rope on the lot. For sure. Our exit strategy is almost typically on an expensive car to go to wholesale, to go to auction or something like that, not to go to retail. So, to answer, I don't know if I've answered that the right way, but I think that that upper price market is a little bit trickier to get all the money out of your car that you think you're going to get. Yeah.
No, that's actually a fair statement. That makes a lot of sense. Because if I was going to spend $40,000 on a used, I'd definitely be thinking about a new, and I'd probably just go with a new. You get a factory warranty, you don't have to worry about anything. It's
once you get there, people don't sometimes want the brain damage of it. Right? Once you've committed to a payment range, sometimes throwing $100 on top of a $300 payment is a big deal. Yeah. Throwing $100 on top of a $900 payment is not such a big deal anymore.
Yeah, fair. Good point. Well, Scott, I appreciate you hopping on the podcast with me. And are you on social media at all? Where can people reach out to you if they have any questions or anything?
Probably LinkedIn is the best place to track me down.
Okay. Guys, if you don't know his name, it's Scott Falcone. You can find him on LinkedIn. And, if there's anything you guys are looking for in the car market, I bet he has a solution for you guys. So, Scott, appreciate you having the show, guys. Everybody out there who's listening, if you enjoyed this episode, share it with somebody that you like. If you didn't, you thought it was boring, share it with somebody that you don't like, and we'll bore them to tears.